Proteas bowed out of the Tri-Nations Series in the West Indies this weekend, while the Baby Boks suffered heavy defeats in the semi-final and the third-place playoff at the Junior World Champs. However, Bafana won the COSAFA Cup, and the Springboks, of course, won their series against Ireland with a hard-fought 19-13 victory in Port Elizabeth. To discuss that result a bit further, I'm joined in studio by Sport24 editor Garen Lamley. Garen, thank you very much for coming in today.
Mate.
Missing your partner in crime, so you're fielding all the questions this morning. So, some mixed reports in the wake of the Boks, or sort of rather some mixed reactions in the wake of the Boks win over Ireland. Obviously, a huge relief considering a week ago at halftime they were staring down the barrel of a gun, 19-3 down, and they managed to turn things around. But yeah, I mean, a lot of questions still around selections and strategies, etc. What did you take from that?
Yeah, certainly more questions than answers. I think after this series, I guess a win is a win, and the Springboks will, they'll certainly take that. Having lost the first test ever defeat to Ireland at Newlands 2 weeks ago now, and as you said, down heavily at halftime at Ellis Park, bounced back from that to pick up a victory to square the series, and then sort of hung on grimly at the end of the third test in Port Elizabeth. They were defending for most of that second half. The stats are fairly ugly in the Springboks. If you look at them, most tackles, fewer passes, more drop ball. It just really didn't. It wasn't really a satisfactory opening test series for new coach Alistair Coetzee. I think it helped that the Ireland team that came out was missing a lot of players. I fear that if they had brought out their strongest team, the result could easily have been 2-1 in Ireland's favour, perhaps even 3-0, the way the Springboks did play. So lots to work on. Not much time, unfortunately, ahead of the Rugby Championships. I think Alistair Coetzee, scratching his head a little bit. I think you could see from the shots of him in the coach's box that the pressure is certainly getting to him. The way they were celebrating sort of made you feel like they'd won the World Cup. It was just a series victory against Ireland. They're saying all the right things. They're talking about rebuilding, which I don't really buy into. You never really rebuild. You should really have the players. You might lose one or two through retirements or injuries, but you're not really ever starting from scratch and building again. There only are really one or two faces that are missing. You think like Victor Matfield, Jean de Villiers, Farid Aprere, perhaps the only three that are missing. Couple of injuries, and that's the same for every single team. When you look at the All Blacks, how they've done against Wales, they're missing 6 or 7 players that have played over 100 tests, and they haven't mentioned the word rebuilding once. So I think the Springboks have a lot to work on in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, all the players now going back to Super Rugby, so Alistair Coetzee won't really have have them under his control until they sort of gather for that opening Rugby Championship match against Argentina.
Garen, in South Africa, we do tend to measure the sort of quality of a Springbok side against whether or not they can, of course, beat the All Blacks and the way the All Blacks are playing and what you just mentioned about depth. South Africa, do we have the same depth? I mean, the Lions players, which everyone's been shouting for getting an opportunity, finally did. But beyond that, what other players do you think belong in the Springbok side, and with just a few more rounds of Super Rugby left to sort of give those guys an opportunity to stick their hands up? I mean, who do you think's missing still?
Yeah, as you say, we certainly don't have the same depth as New Zealand, which is quite frightening considering how many people they just have in their country compared to those that we have in this country. You just quickly mentioned earlier the Baby Boks, how they lost 3 out of 5 games. The only teams that they managed to beat were Japan and France, relative minnows at that level, whereas the All Blacks, they lost 1 game, scored more tries than every other team, yet somehow finished 5th to the Baby Boks' 4th place. So there's a lot of talent coming through at New Zealand level that are just born into scoring tries, it seems. They sort of have that built into them, that they just can score tries at will. Whereas the South African teams are very much defence-orientated, lower scoring matches. And if you come up against a team that is attack-minded, then sometimes they can really run right. And we saw that a few times for the Baby Boks. So depth-wise, a little bit of a struggle for Alistair Coetzee. Obviously, I'm guessing that Pat Lambie, once he's over the sort of concussion that saw him miss the 2nd and 3rd test, once he's back, I think he'll come in at number 10. Got a bit of a concern over Elton Jantjies. Obviously he's played really well for the Lions, and everybody's been calling for him to start. And I think begrudgingly a little bit Alistair Coetzee, who's never really been an Elton Jantjies fan. When he was down at the Stormers and Alistair was the Stormers coach, he didn't, he fell out of favour there. Yankees ended up moving to the Lions to sort of get away from Coetzee, who didn't have as much faith in him as he has now. But I think he's been a little bit exposed at times. You saw the way the Island scored their one try. They ran straight at him. He's not the biggest guy, not the best on defense. You know, to his credit, he did put in that kick for JP Peterson that led to the try. But, you know, that was just one kick in 80 minutes. And, you know, I feel Pat Lambie probably offers more. He's certainly got more experience. I think he'd be my first choice fly if everyone was sort of fit. So I think he's certainly going to come back into the mix. Brian Abana, obviously on the wing, he sat out this Island series due to some commitments to his French club in their top 14 playoffs. You know, he's going to be back in the reckoning. He obviously adds immense experience. But then at the same time, what does that sort of do for JP Peterson, who somehow was man of the match on Saturday, and Ruan Combrink on the other wing, who had such a fantastic second half at Ellis Park, picked up the man of the match award there. Wasn't as good, I didn't think, in PE, but still solid enough to warrant, you know, selection. So it's more of a headache than players back. You know, I think Alistair Coetzee might have a few extra players to choose from, but it's really where he's going to fit in. And unfortunately, you've got to think of these quotas that's sort of hanging over his head the whole time. You know, this goal for 2019 where 50% of the squad has to be of colour. You know, we're sort of picking players like Pat Lambie and Ruan Combrink who are white. Let's face it, you know, we need to sort of grow the talent pool and depth of players that are of colour. So he always has to be mindful of that fact. Just, you know, one of those things that the new coach was always going to have to accept.